to do mentoring correctly. Anyone want to pick up on that phrasing, doing mentoring correctly?
I'm waiting to see if Yvonne's going to take the.
Well, I think in the context of having a mentorship certificate of competence, in order for it to demonstrate its value, I think having common terminology is useful, and having common standards to be able to have an adjudicator look and say, yes, this person has the credentials required or not. I think that there is going to always be a little bit of a requirement for it to be rigorous, and yet still stay fluid in the conversation, so that the mentor has the capacity to lead the conversation, to guide the mentee, depending on where the conversation is getting stuck, where it's flowing easily, where there's hesitation. And those are nuances that a seasoned mentor can pick up on. And someone who's going for their certification may not necessarily have that level of understanding initially, but they will once they start looking at the certificate of competence assessment.
Yes. Well, I've been purposeful in the use of the word correctly versus doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm going, okay, if I'm doing it right, what does it mean if I do it left? Mm-hmm. And I'm playing. I get that. You know, I play with words. But the notion is that if we are constantly talking about right, there starts to become an element of the shoulda, woulda, coulda kind of conversation comes in. I use the word correctly, and to Yvonne, your point of the notion of the WISE practices, inspired standards, the terms that I use to explain action outcomes, to have something to lean against as you improve, focus, and strengthen your practice of mentoring, is to understand what it means to have the competence of mentor, which is what the IMC, the International Mentoring Community, is bringing forward for the world. And therefore, the words we choose that we've been sharing have to be correct to the situation in which they're going to be used. That's my 2 toonies worth out of Canada. Doug?
Yeah, so I'm kind of struggling with the concept of correct, and I'm not sure why, but I'm
wonderful.
And maybe it's because of the approach that I take to the conversations and my choice of words that I use when I'm having a conversation with a protege or a mentee, whatever term you're comfortable with. Because if it was correct each and every time that I did something with a particular individual, excuse me, there would be no room for me to learn and grow and change how I deliver. So change my practice, the practice of mentoring. So changing the concepts and the processes. If I say, well, I'm going to do them correctly, I feel as though I'm not allowing myself to explore different options, for lack of a better choice of words, different options on how I could deal with a particular situation.
It's great, and that's the exploration that we're looking for in these conversations, a word I might use, Doug uses, Yvonne uses, and those of you who are listening in, is what's going to be in place, right, for that time to be able to have this collaborative conversation, this to establish this collaborative alliance, to find the trust between you so that you can do this learning personally and professionally. And I think that that's really where we're going with. And I think it's wonderful to have these conversations. And I will continue to encourage us, right, in IMC to do that. And I'll do whatever I can to have that happen. And I know Doug's nodding his head, so I'm sure that we're going to find ways to keep doing this.
Well, I also have a perspective on the word wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that the word wrong is helpful to focus on. I think that there are learnings and lessons in life, and we don't get to experience alternate ways of getting creative if something is labeled as wrong, because that seems very final. So I look at, failure, which some people may say something is a failure, but I look at it as a lesson. It's a learning opportunity to do something differently next time.
For
so
sure.
in the context of the competence assessment, I think that's where the skillful adjudicator is able to look and say, this piece may have a variance from the ideal, and yet it still has led to an effective conversation. Because I think you can have correct conversations that may not necessarily take the mentee down a path where they're actually willing to explore something. They know that they got it right, but does that lead them into action and trying it themselves? Maybe, maybe not. And if the essence of mentoring is for learning, then I think we need to give that learning room to breathe. And being right and wrong isn't necessarily where I would see that flourishing.
With the times that I've worked with mentees, proteges, one of the things that I came to understand very quickly is the interaction with the words of the person I am interacting with. There's many times in my life where people have said, you're too academic, you're too this, you're too that, you're this and you're that. And I kept scratching my head trying to figure out what is the message for me. And then I started to pick, no, it's what's happening is that I may be overriding or taking rabbit hole trips or whatever because of my language and my interaction. But if I come to know the person, right, and meet them where they are, and I start to listen to the words that they're using and be open enough to ask the person, I'm not sure I understand how you're using that word. Can we explore that a little bit? Once I caught on to that because of my lived experience and where I came from, it made the world of difference in terms of the conversation that was happening. And so I would just wanted to share that little insight with you as well.
Can I just want to reference an example from my book? Aluminum foil, right? Aluminum foil is great for keeping hot food. However, you can't see what's inside. So if you're covering leftovers with see-through cling wrap, it's easy and it's time-saving. And it became a popular choice, certainly in my house growing up, because if we look at this, journey down scientific memory lane, I see being wrong akin to aluminum foil. Those who think you're wrong have created a solid idea of how things should be, which may or may not fit with your values and actions. So what instead, if we saw life through a lens of cling wrap, seeing through the veil of transparency and looking at what's possible instead of the static wall of aluminum foil, the closed mind of a solid cover.
Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So I see lessons as opportunities. They're not necessarily right or wrong. If you choose to look at life through the lens of clarity, the clear plastic wrap that keeps things fresh and lasting longer, you can clearly see how mistakes in life are actually lessons. Quote.
True. And the conversation that we're having in the first hour of our time together was to alert those who are coming to mentoring for the first time, or they're in the journey, they're still early on, and what we're doing is sharing. And the deepness and richness, which is a couple of words that Doug and I use quite often in the international mentoring community, the deeper and the richer that we can get, the better it's going to be for all those who are involved. I think the analogy I would make is something else that I learned, and it came through mentoring as well. And it was a time that I was the mentee, and the mentor were sharing something with me, and I was learning about this tools and techniques to be able to facilitate group interaction to help them do cultural shift and mergers and acquisitions and all that. And he said to me, there's a difference between finding and discovering or looking for, exploring the straight line or the straightest line. And I shook my head a little bit and I said, well, aren't we all about vectors trying to get from A to B? That's the language we use. And he says, slow down a little bit. We're talking about working with people or in persons. And sometimes it's about finding the straightest line to get there, which could have some curves, backswings, but it's this notion of the straightest line. And ever since then, when I mentor, I am doing it from a place of the straightest line with the words of those that I'm interacting with. And again, I just thought I'd share that little anecdote as well.
Yeah, and I think that speaks also to Doug's point about not necessarily feeling that he wants to go through a checklist to know that the conversation is on track. However, at the end, to be able to reflect and say, yes, we covered these things, but they were woven into the conversation as opposed to standalone points that got a yes or a no answer, is what's going to help the conversation feel comfortable, warm, engaging, and real.
Yes, for sure. And I think that what we're doing is we're starting to almost, in a sense, sort of generate a storyline of, the importance of words and the terms and concepts you're using, and letting that open up the pathway that allows us to move forward, right, together, and to be able to enjoy that conversation as we move forward together, which also requires both the mentor and mentee protege to be alert to this reflection, to reflect in and on. And I think that's a really great insight for us this morning.